You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, all of you book lovers. We have a very special treat for you, Kristen and I, here today. We have discovered a book that we truly adore. Kristen and I have the advanced reader's copy. We completely agree. It is an absolute treasure. And of course, the author is with us here today. We're honored to have Lynda Loigman with us. Welcome to BOOKSTORM, Lynda.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk with you both. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm going to show the cover real quick for our YouTube watchers because it's pretty cool. And we are here to talk about the Love Elixir of Augusta Stern. If that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know what will. But before we get started, I want to tell a little bit of your bio because you have some wonderful accolades and awards that you've gotten here. Lynda is a graduate from Harvard College and the Columbia Law School. Her first debut novel will sound familiar to many of you. The Two-Family House was a USA Today bestseller and nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award in Historical Fiction. Wow. Her second book, The Wartime Sisters, was selected as a Women's World Book Club pick and a best book by Real Simple magazine. The Matchmaker's Gift, which we all know and love, was a best new book by People magazine, best book of fall by New York Post. Parade magazine loved it, BuzzFeed, and Good Morning America. And so that's why we know when Lynda comes out with another book, The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern, we know it's going to be something very special. And sure enough, it was. And I'm going to quote one author who gave a wonderful endorsement. It's Shelby Van Pelt, who's a friend of BOOKSTORM. She's been on our show. We love her.
So great. Yeah.
We love her.
Amazing.
And that was her debut novel that really soared. But she says this, that the book is equal parts humor, heart, and hope, a sparkling ode to second chances, a must read that will leave you believing in the power of believing. Yes, Shelby, we couldn't agree more. It's truly a treasure. And welcome, Lynda, to BOOKSTORM.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you because this is like the very beginning, the beginning of the book coming out in the world and the beginning of tour. And I love beginnings. So I love getting started and all of the just openness and I don't know, it's a sparkly time. So I'm excited to be with you.
Lynda, I like beginnings too. It's almost like a fresh start or a big blank page in front of you. So I'm with you on that one. I'd like to give our listeners some of the backdrop of what's going on in the story. And I won't give away any spoilers, but I thought I would tell them a little bit about this absolutely riveting, beautiful, funny story. Chris and I actually text each other while we're reading stories, and we both instantly fell in love with this one. Now, in your story, the historical backdrop is actually quite interesting and very important here. We encounter Augusta Stern at two very pivotal points in her life. Now, when she's a teenager, she's growing up in 1920s Brooklyn, and her father is the owner of a local pharmacy. He is a pharmacist, and he is trusted by all the locals. He dispenses medical advice. He, is there to listen to them, but he is a man of science. Augusta's mom dies very early in the story, and her great aunt Esther moves in. Now, Augusta is very intrigued by her great aunt. She doesn't know much about her, but she knows that she may have some unconventional methods of maybe healing. And of course, this is at odds with what her father stands for and what he's respected for. Now, Augusta is preparing for pharmacy college, and she's torn. She's got her father on the one hand and wanting to follow in his footsteps, and she's very intrigued by what her great aunt is doing. And there's also a young man in the mix, her father's delivery boy, Irving Rivkin. And I'm not going to say what happens. Let's just say Augusta uses one of her aunt's very potent elixirs, and it doesn't go so well. Now we fast forward 60 years and we encounter Augusta. She is just retiring, very reluctantly, I may add, and she's making a new home for herself in Southern Florida. She's at a senior living community and she encounters a few people, including Irving Rivkin. And what transpires is just so cool and beautiful how you unwind it. So I don't want to say anything else, but did you want to add anything to that backdrop?
No, I mean, I think you covered it. It's a dual timeline story, and which was really important for this novel. Even though after The Matchmaker's Gift, I swore I would never write another dual timeline story again because they're very tough to write and very complicated. But I just really felt like in order to understand Augusta, modern Augusta, you really need to go back and see what went wrong, where her life sort of went off course, where her relationships sort of went off course. And so it's a little bit of solving a mystery. You go back and forth and you try to figure out what it is that went wrong. And there is a lot of humor, which makes it fun. I try to sort of give readers this sense of deja vu where she makes the same mistake twice, or at least she almost makes the same mistake twice. So that made it challenging too, to do that without being too hokey, without being too repetitive. Um, so it was not an easy book to write, but it was a very fun, uplifting book to write.
It's hysterical. There's some heartfelt scenes, but there's times where I laughed right out loud. And we can all relate to these characters. I just loved it. I especially thought it was interesting when Esther told Augusta, my elixir only helps the mind to see and to feel more clearly. For example, to unlock the mind, because some people's minds are always closed. And so I had to ask you as the author and let me say mixologist of this love potion, how does a closed mind stop us from achieving just about everything in life? A career, not just love, goals, friendships. And is the opening of our own mind enough? Because I can't help but look at Augusta and see that the mind of those people who supported her and influenced her also mattered. Is it enough?
So it's a really interesting question, and I'm glad that you picked up on that. There are a lot of things that I want to say about that. The first is, when we first meet Augusta, her mind is closed, and that is part of her journey. That's part of her character arc. If you're going to talk about it in terms of process, that's one of her biggest flaws. So she's achieved all this success professionally, but personally she hasn't. And it's because when she was, as you said, torn between her father's sort of scientific side and her great aunt's intangible, mystical, whatever you want to call it, side, something happens and she decides she's shutting that part down. And so she goes through life really only open to what is clear, what is uncomplicated, what is professional, and she closes her whole heart off. So she's leading like a half life, when we meet her. And that is a very sad thing. And so throughout the story, um, we're hoping that she's going to open her heart. I think in life, if we're talking not about the story, but just like life generally, yeah, I mean, we have to be open to new experiences. I mean, especially I'm 55 years old, right? So I'm like right, like socks, right firmly in the middle of middle age. And it's very easy to become complacent. It's very easy to just sort of say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And even like with COVID, I wrote this book. I wrote this book after COVID, but like COVID affected us all so much. I feel like a lot of us shut down, mentally, and we're still emerging from that. We're still like not quite. I know I'm not. I'm still like, I don't really wear shoes. Like I don't, mean, that's a small thing, but you know what I'm saying. My sneakers are like everything to me. Like we need to, get back to where we were. We need to be open. I think it's just a really important thing for everyone. In terms of like the keeping the minds open of those around you, that's a tough thing. But I think part of what being open means is being empathetic to other people and having compassion and keeping an open mind to seeing different sides of of stories of the world. Like, we're heading into an election. It's a very fraught time in our country, and we all have to be compassionate towards each other, no matter, where we are on the spectrum of and what side we're on, like being open-minded and not just shutting someone down, not pushing someone out of your life because they might think one thing that's different from you, I think is such an important thing, especially now. Like that's especially on my mind now as we're heading into this. But the whole idea of the elixir having that effect came because I was doing this research on, like herbalism and holistic medicine and like researching all the herbs that did different things so I could name the right ingredients for what Esther was doing. But I was also researching folklore and Jewish mysticism and magic and all these different things. And I came across this herb that I found, I don't even know where I found it. It's called, I have to like say the word, Raskovnik. And it's a magical herb. And it's from Russian folklore, and it looks sort of like a four-leaf clover. And if it says, when I was reading this, I'm just going to read right from it. According to lore, the Raskovnik has the magical property to unlock or uncover anything that is locked or closed. Mm. And when I read that about it, I was like, well, this is the herb, like this is it. This is the ingredient. And this is what this elixir is going to do. Because even though the book is called The Love Elixir, right? I mean, it can't be a literal love potion. That's, first of all, that's kind of hokey. Second of all, like I don't want people roofing people in my book. Like it's sort of like smacks of like a roofing situation. This is not good. I don't want to be doing that. Oh. There has to be free will. Like you can't force someone to fall in love with someone else. But the idea, not just of having an open mind, but having clarity, of knowing, of unlocking all your indecision, like what a gift that would be, right? If we could just think clearly, if we could know what it is that we want, know what it is that we need, that would be like such a gift. So I wish I had that magical herb sometimes, when I'm just caught between decision making.
And I love that Esther also told Augusta, you cannot give the elixir without letting the patient or the friend or person know that they're taking it. So I wondered if the whole open mind concept, let me just throw in the word about believing.
Yeah. You have to go into it freely. You have to, like it's just it was important for me in the story that the people, you have to be honest with each other. Like love can't come, relationships can't come, friendships, nothing comes without honesty and without openness. And you can't trick people into liking you, and you can't bribe people into loving you, whatever it is. It just doesn't work. So it's sort of, I maybe hit the reader over the head with it a little bit in the book, or I make it really literal, but I just wanted that to be crystal clear, that nobody here is getting into anything that they don't want to get into. And that Esther felt very strongly. She was it's sort of like an attitude that's ahead of her time, right? She's not going to treat people. She's not going to like slip them a secret something, like she's just not going to do it. I mean, I guess when I thought about it, I definitely had in mind, like, when people like in the 1950s, you think of like, I don't know, husbands like not drugging their wives, but like giving their wives like medicine without them really knowing exactly what's in it, like things like that, those sort of like terrible stories that you hear. And I just wanted Esther to be very aware that in order to be just an honest, careful, good practitioner, it requires that. It requires that full knowledge of what you're taking and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's a treasure.
And I can hear in all those disclaimers the lawyer in you coming through.
Yeah.
So, that made me laugh.
Yeah, a little bit. But I don't know. I like all my I's dotted and all my T's crossed. So
there's a beautiful theme throughout your story about feeling seen. Now, Augusta, when she was young, she was called Goldie, so I'm going to call her Goldie. She always felt seen by Irving. And it was one of the reasons that she loved him when she was young. And we also see throughout your story, though, times where women were not seen by their medical care providers or by the people who were supposed to be helping them. And I was wondering if you thought that that's why many women turn to unconventional healers, because they were tired of being dismissed or their complaints not being taken seriously.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you picked up on that in the book because that was something that was really important to me to write into the story. Um, I think so. I mean, I've experienced that. I think as women, like here we are, three women, right? I think we've all experienced that. I had like 12 years ago, I had this terrible case of vertigo that was sort of incapacitating. Like, and I went to this male ENT over and over and over again. And he kept sort of implying that it was just like because I was stressed or I was whatever. And if I went on vacation, it would go away. And I just had to drink more water and like get over myself, basically. And that, I mean, I started to get so depressed because I felt like I was going bonkers, like
Yeah.
he just kept saying this to me until I finally spoke to a friend who had a similar kind of vertigo. And she gave me the name of this specialist who happened to be a woman, but um, who like specialized in vertigo and in balance issues and in all these things. And she did all these tests on me, and I had this vestibular vertigo, like that's related to migraines. And like she gave me medicine. There was a reason that I had it. It wasn't just because I was stressed. There was a reason. And she gave me the medicine that I needed. And I feel like she saved my life. Like I don't want to be dramatic, but I do feel like she did, not because she made me feel better physically, though that was part of it, but because she made me feel not insane. She
Mhm.
made me feel like I was valid. And so that was a really important thing for me to put into the story and an important part of what Esther does. When Esther helps all kinds of people in this story. And one of my favorite things was just like writing all the little vignettes of um, the people she helps. But one of the women she helps desperately wants to get pregnant, and it's just been, this has she hasn't, and she's just been dismissed by all these men in the medical field, all the doctors. Everyone tells her it's just not going to happen, and there's nothing else they can do. And Esther believes that there are other ways to go about this. She believes there are other reasons, things that are unseen, things that are unquantifiable reasons why this might not be happening for this woman. And some of them are very practical. She
Yeah.
says, your husband travels, tell him not to travel for 3 months.
Right.
Stay home, make a baby. Like some of them, so it's not just that it's all hocus pocus, like mystical, magical, whatever. There are parts of that, but there are also true, real reasons why this woman might not be getting pregnant that no one has bothered to talk to her about or inquire about, or no one has bothered to see her. So I think to feel seen again is a tremendous gift. And I think that's true in the medical field. I think that's obviously true in our romantic lives. Irving knows that Augusta's beauty comes from her brain. He
Yeah.
sees her as most beautiful when she's doing her homework. He sees her as most beautiful when she's doing her work. He knows what makes her happy, and that's what lights her up from within. So it's so important that way. And I would say also, like, it's really important to be seen professionally. I mean, especially when you're in a creative field, like my field, right? Like being a writer, you, how much do we crave that someone reads our words and thinks about them and accepts them in the spirit with which we offered them and feels them? Like that's, I mean, a tremendous, I mean, I keep using the word gift, but it is.
Yeah.
That's the greatest gift for a writer, right? And in so many fields, like I think it's like one of the pieces of humanity that connects us all. We all just crave that. It's part of what makes us not lonely and makes
Yeah.
us feel part of a bigger something.
Yeah, I don't know if you intended to do this or not, but I also saw that theme and it resonated with the people who resided at the senior living community. We tend to write off older people as
Yeah.
all the old people who live in that facility, but they had so many talents and abilities and personality quirks. And you couldn't just say it's a bunch of old people. They
Yeah.
were individual and unique, and we had to see them because they
Yeah.
were such vivid characters.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that is a really important point because as people age, we do see them less and less as people and we discount their feelings. And I think one of the things that that I hope readers feel when they pick up this story is that Augusta and Irving at 80, their everything about their romance is just as important as it was when they were embarking on that romance when they were teenagers. It's just as romantic. It's just as heartfelt. It's just the sparks are all there. It means just as much to them then, if not more, you know? And so the idea of, you know, octogenarians, you know, maybe, you know, finding romance might seem kind of hokey, but I just think this is the thing. Age just doesn't change us. Age does not change who we are fundamentally.
We
We have
sense it
those
as
same.
we get older. We know this is true. But I loved also that you did that at the retirement home because maybe, like you said, even more so, they felt an even deeper love because of a wealth of wisdom and experience and
Yeah.
hurt and joy. And there's something about our culture that dissipates and diminishes senior citizens that I don't think we find in other cultures around the
Mhm.
world. And I loved that about the book. I have to just tease our readers though, because I loved the elixir incantation. And
Mm.
it goes like this: to ease the pain of those who suffer, to repair the bodies of those who are ill, to restore the mind of those in need.
Yeah.
And I had to say thank you for reminding us that a person is not just a body of bones and blood vessels and tissues, that we have a heart that can be broken, a mind that could be battered and bruised. And can a homeopathic expert, a pharmacist, or even a physician truly repair one part of who we are as human without looking at all pieces? You made us consider that.
Thank you. I mean, it's such a good question. And I mean, I think the answer is no. It's always no. You know, I'm a parent, and I think as parents, you know, we feel this a lot with our children. You know, we all want, especially again during COVID, like COVID, COVID sort of brought this home in a huge way, right? Like we all were so afraid of getting physically ill and
Mhm,
losing the people that we loved, and that physical illness was such a scary, scary thing. But then at the same time, we were so mentally, you know, it created so much anxiety, so much mental impairment, so much suffering mentally. And you know, I think we all feel as parents like we as human. I mean, I say it as a parent because I just feel like I don't know, that that time especially taught me that like mental wellness is just as important as physical wellness. And you can't be a whole and complete well person unless you have both.
mhm,
And I think Esther knows that. Esther understands that. Solomon Stern is much more focused on just the physical wellness. He doesn't necessarily see that other piece. He's a compassionate person, but he doesn't, you know, he loses his wife to diabetes like shortly before the medicine insulin comes out that would have saved her life. And as a pharmacist, how frustrating would that be, right? Like he has every medicine in his prescription room downstairs. He has access to everything that could heal anybody, and yet there's nothing that will heal her. And then there is, and so it's just a case of bad timing. So there's a bitterness to him. I think that prevents him from really having that open mind that we're talking about, and that prevents him from being able to heal people wholly and entirely. Um, but Esther knows this. You know, Esther sees this in people, um, and she tries to do it. She understands that she understands that there's more than one thing going on with every illness. There's a person that like one of the first people that she helps out in the store is this woman who comes in who's getting like dyspepsia tablets for her twin boys because they keep getting stomach aches after she cooks. And Esther's like she's very wise, you know, and she know like Solomon Stern just keeps giving out the pills like here are the stomach pills, here are the stomach pills. And Esther's like, come with me. And she brings the woman, you know, upstairs and she's like, I want you to feed them this chicken soup. and it's really good and they're going to like it and they're not going to have any stomach pains tonight. But then she goes further because she knows. She asks the woman. The woman says, "I'm cooking them fish and spinach." Well, they're like 8-year-old boys or something, like they don't want to eat fish and spinach. And Esther knows, like, it's a psychological thing. Like, they're complaining because they hate what you're feeding them, and she knows how to advise this woman, like, because she's thinking about both. She's thinking about the psychological aspect and the physical aspect. And I think they're just both so important.
Mhm. I love that scene. That's a hysterical scene in the book for all of you readers. And let me add one more thing. Esther also knows and came out and even told Augusta that there's some people that she could not have cured no
Mm-hmm.
matter
Yep.
what. Little reality thrown in there. Yes, we need to believe. Yes, we believe in the homeopathic, spiritual, psychological, emotional us, but also there's some things out of our control. I thank you for adding that.
Well, there are limits, right? There are limits to what there are limit. We can't live forever, and I wasn't going to. This isn't like Lord of the Rings where the elves live for eternity or whatever. Like, it can't be that, and we can't get to. I don't know. Like, it's very easy when you write a book with a little magical realism to go too far. You have to kind of. That's why it's magical realism, right? Instead of just a fantasy book. Like, you have to really keep it within the realm of what's believable and what's actual and you know, what's of this world. And Augusta needs to hear that. She needs to know that. It's a hard lesson, but, you know, we're bound by mortality. So there's only so much healing that we can do.
I want to ask you a final question. I know we could talk about Augusta and Great Aunt Esther for hours because they're so
Oh, they're
interesting.
fun. They're fun to talk
So
about.
fun.
But I want to ask you this. We've talked about how Great Aunt Esther was equal parts magic and maybe science, and very much it was a part of Augusta's life as well, whether she wants to admit it or not. Why do you think those gifts in women could potentially be a threat to men who are in the same profession?
So this is a theme that I've kind of like explored in my other books too. So in The Matchmaker's Gift, Sarah, our matchmaker, she has this talent for making matches that's unlike and greater than any that any man has. But in that time in New York City, the profession is dominated by men, and the men are jealous, and they say she's using tricks, and they say that she's not playing fair, and she's stealing, their livelihood from them. And Esther, it could be a sort of similar thing. It's not quite the same, but she talks about what happens when she is in the old country, when she's back in Russia, and how she became a healer. And she talks about this man in her village, who studied, was allowed to study, was allowed to go to school. She wasn't. So he becomes the apothecary, and he's the sort of person who's validated, right? Or he's the, I'm looking for the word, it's escaping me, but he's got the rubber stamp. He's the apothecary. He's the person who people go to. And she has the same knowledge that's self-taught because she wasn't allowed to go to school, and she's labeled the witch, because she says, when you're a talented woman, some men will always see a talented woman as a witch. They will think that she can't possibly be as smart as a man, or as gifted as a man, or work as hard as a man. And so if she is succeeding, it has to be because of something that's not fair. It has to be some sort of magic or something sinister or whatever it is, or she's getting by because of some sort of privilege that the man doesn't have. And that's something that I like to explore in my books, especially when you're talking about women who are breaking boundaries, which Esther does, and Augusta definitely does. Um, I mean, Augusta was inspired by all these stories that I had heard of my husband's great grandmother. And she was a really interesting woman. Her nickname was Goldie. I always knew her as Goldie, but then I found out that her real name was Augusta. So my character is actually really named after her. But she married a man, didn't go to college, got married, had like a 2-year old, and her husband was a pharmacist. And he passed away. Suddenly, I think he had a heart attack when she had a 2-year old. And she went to pharmacy school. She went to Fordham Pharmacy School. She graduated in 1921 so she could run the store that her husband left to her, and so that she could feed her child. And she worked into her 80s, and she worked at the store until the store, I think the neighborhood eventually, after many, many decades, became not the greatest neighborhood. She was robbed a couple times and she decided to sell the store. And then she worked as a hospital pharmacist, the way that Augusta does. And my father-in-law would tell me that he would help her, like, remember white out? She would white out her certificate so that she would seem younger than she was, and she would just keep working. She would just go from hospital to hospital, and she was sharp as a tack, and she just like kept going. And I'm sure, she was an unusual woman for her time, and those women who break those boundaries are very inspiring to me. I don't know. I don't know why men, Solomon Stern is really threatened by Augusta, by Esther and Augusta. He's threatened by his daughter too. He doesn't want her to follow what Esther is doing. He wants her to only do things his way. He's afraid of Esther's way of doing things, which is such a shame, because if you combine the two of them, how great would they have been as a team? But he feels that he's, built his whole reputation on this one way of doing things. He is beloved in the neighborhood. He's trusted, and he doesn't want Esther coming in and mucking things up. And he doesn't want his daughter to get involved in that kind of hocus pocus, and he doesn't want her to muck things up. So he's very threatened. And I think that happens a lot. It just does. There's something about a talented woman that puts people off.
Yep.
I mean,
absolutely.
we see it over and over again, right? In so many, in every field.
Yeah.
Certainly now in politics, we see it, right? I mean, whatever you think about all the candidates, there's a lot of stuff that Kamala Harris deals with because she's a woman, right? Like, whatever you think about that, like having a woman, like, people are not always ready for women to have these roles.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. I don't know. It's just something that, it's like tale as old as time, right? It never goes away. We want it to go away. We want to think that we've come so far, but it doesn't ever really entirely go away. Can I go back to the question from before for 1 second?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So when we were talking about the incantation and the inside of the mortar and pestle, so the reason for that is like sort of twofold. First of all, there's this special prayer that we say at services. If you go to like a synagogue and you go to a Friday night service, there's a prayer called the Misha Berach prayer. And it's for the healing of the body and the spirit. And it's a very beautiful prayer. And you kind of like, if someone, I think I've seen it at churches too. Like if someone that is sick, you can kind of call out their name, or you light a candle for them. It's that kind of idea that, you're trying to pray for someone who is ill. So some of the idea of that came from that prayer. But also I was researching again, like all the magic and all the stuff. And when you were talking about earlier, like how mortars and pestles came, like they've been around for forever. But there used to be, I came across this article about something called incantation bowls. And they were like from like, I don't know, like 600 AD, like a really long time ago, found in like what was then Iraq and Iran. And they were like, they were bowls, like stone bowls, I think stone, and they would find them buried underneath houses or cemeteries or places of worship. And they had words written all on the inside in a spiral, the way that Esther's mortar and pestle is. And it was like to protect the house. And they would be found like upside down underneath the house to sort of like keep out the bad spirits. And so when I read about those incantation bowls, I thought it was so cool. And I made Esther's mortar kind of like a modern day incantation bowl because I thought it was a really cool thing. Sorry, I forgot about that. So
no, I love it. Do you have a family heirloom that you want to share with us?
Well, so this is my husband's great grandmother's mortar and pestle that Beautiful. My mother-in-law, because it was her grandmother, my mother-in-law has on display like at her house. She has actually a miniature one that goes with it. And I said, can I please borrow this? And so I've had it in my house for like a year, even longer. She really wants it back. I keep saying I'm gonna give it back, but can I just have it like for a little bit so I can like show people? Because it's so neat. It doesn't have anything written inside, but it is really heavy and really old. And it's kind of like, you know, I actually, so I have the actual copies. I know you guys have the ARC, but the new
Yes.
copies you can see like there's foil if I can catch the light,
Ooh,
like so it's a little shiny.
I love the
Um,
shine in it. That makes
yeah,
it
I
really
love the shine. So,
special.
so it makes me happy because it's sort of, and
And
when they were designing this book cover, the first design had a white mortar and pestle that
oh,
looked like stone. And I sent them a picture of this one and I was like, can you make it like a brass color?
and
Um,
I love what you said about the words around the mortar that you had, because I think you showed us in the story that words are very important,
yeah,
very
yeah,
important.
yeah.
And so before we let you go, we're going to ask you one more thing, because could you read the very last paragraph of the book?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
beginning with after 81 years and two failed love elixirs, because this
Sure.
just speaks so profoundly to
Sure.
everyone, and it's going to be such a beautiful teaser. And I just loved it. When we read that final paragraph, I just got choked up a little bit. It's just
Mm.
so beautifully written.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I probably cried when I wrote it because I do tend to cry as I'm writing, like when I'm really like in the weeds. So this is yeah, this is the very the very end of the book. After 81 years and two failed love elixirs, Augusta Stern knew exactly who she was. A woman of science like her father, an old world healer like her aunt. She believed in medicine and in miracles. She believed in family and in love. She believed in the power of moonlight in kitchens, in the power of women, in the power of words. She believed that even on life's darkest days, a bowl of chicken soup could offer comfort. She believed that the world still held a bit of magic for those who were patient and wise enough to wait.
Love it so
Beautiful.
much.
Beautiful. And Linda, thank you so much for sharing your family stories, the inspiration behind the story. We just loved hearing that. And I know we've kept you a little long.
No,
Can you give us
I'm
a clue of
I
maybe
honestly
what's
don't
on
know
your
how long
radar?
this is supposed to go. I have no idea. So I'm like,
We'll
I
take you.
can talk forever, whatever. It's fine.
But we were wondering if you can maybe just give us a quick clue about what you're working on next.
Yes. Oh boy, this next book has really, it's been like, it's the heart of it has been eluding me, but I think I finally got to it. It's about a woman who she has a dream about a book every night for a very like for her whole life. She has this strange dream, and she is a very she's a lonely woman. She was adopted. She doesn't have any real family that she knows, and she sort of embarks on this journey to try to figure out her family. And it's just about books that change our lives, books that save our lives, books that ruin our lives, all the things that books can do. And
Excellent.
that's kind of
Sounds great.
all I
Yeah,
can
Sounds
that
say
wonderful.
for now.
it does. Well, we hope you come back and talk about your next books. We just
I
love
would love
talking with
to.
you. And I'll tell our listeners how to get in touch with you. You have a beautiful website. And I'm going to spell your name because we want them to find you. LyndaCohenLoigman.com. And you're also on Facebook, on Instagram, on X. And thank you once again. I know you even have a newsletter. So you are very accessible, but also just a wonderful, wonderful discussion about this incredible book. So
Thank
thank you again for coming on our show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love this. This is like one of my very first, so they're all going to be bad after this. How is
Oh,
how
yeah.
is anybody else going to live up to this one?
Oh, we
How
love
is
to
it going
hear
to
that.
go?
Thank you for
Oh.
joining us. Hope to see you again. Loved
All right.
it.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Bye, Linda.
The Love Elixir by Augusta Stern. Just the title makes you want to open it, doesn't it, Kristen? Um, I loved everything that we
Absolutely.
talked about. We talked about so many things. I think one of my favorite things was how Irving thought Augusta was at her very best when she was studying her formulas or reading her books. That's when she was the most herself. and the most beautiful to him. And I just thought, isn't that a definition of love? Not that we want someone to fulfill a space in our lives or that we need someone to make us feel better about ourselves, but that we can see the beauty and the strength and the talent in someone else and appreciate it. I loved that little nugget that she threw in there.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that idea of being seen for who we are and what's important to us. And that was important to her, her learning, her studying. So I agree with you. That was also one of the times where you were like, I love this character, Irving.
Mhm.
He was such
Mhm.
a great character. What did you think about this whole element of mysticism and science? Because we think
Well,
they can't coexist.
I think very much that mysticism is a word that defines a lot of different things. So I would include in that definition a belief in things that you cannot see.
Yeah.
So in this case, it would be a belief, unlike Solomon, had to rely on his studies and what he was taught about the medical world that could be proven, that we do believe that there is another world and an existence of something that affects us, strengthens or even weaknesses us that we cannot see. So
Yeah.
maybe for me, mysticism would be believing in something that cannot be proven. And let me just do a whole little flip that love is something that we cannot see, we cannot touch, we cannot hear, we cannot hold it in our hand, but it is probably one of the most powerful tools in human existence.
Yeah. Much like the mind. We can't see or touch or measure it, a brain, that's different. But I love that because it's things we just can't understand. And we have to be comfortable operating in that realm because, first of all, that's sometimes where the magic is and the excitement and the joy. So I think that's pretty good. Well, I am going to tell our listeners about some other fantastic authors that we have coming up. We've got Shelley Noble with the Colony Club, Jessica Strasser with Catch You Later, Lori Frankel with Family, Robert Dugoni with Beyond Reasonable Doubt, Jessica Hagedorn, Dog Eaters, Helena Eklund, Clever Little Thing, Victor Methos, The Silent Watcher, Graham Brown for Clive Cussler, Desolation Code, Amal El Motar, The River Has Roots, Alex Hay, The Queen of Fives. And listeners, as you know, we're growing every week. I think we're in 91 countries, 1,900 cities, and all 50 states. We ask that you share our links. We love having these deep discussions with authors, and we think that you like them as well. So stay on our radar. You can find us at bookstormpodcast.com. We're on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, and you can find us also on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm and podcast. We should come right up. And listeners, until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.